We have opposite experiences with ultra races. Every one I've ever done, it's been like perfect weather, nice leisurely run through the woods.
Start this descent, man, and I'm like in a turn, and my front tire finds a huge rock and just double punctures. I've flatted like maybe once in the whole year, and then I flat in the first hour of like the race I've been dreaming about.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, I was joined by Jason Anderson. This is his second time on the podcast, and the last time he was on, he was gearing up to take on a 500-mile bike ride through Spain. He has since completed the race, and in today's episode, we chatted about all of the crazy things that he went through while he was out there. Before we begin, if you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Seriously, doing any of that stuff really helps us out, and every time you subscribe, I feel a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling in my tummy. Enjoy the show. Dude, welcome back to the show. You're the second person to ever do 2 episodes with us.
I'm honored.
When we chatted last time, you had this big 500-mile bike through the landscape of Spain in your future, and you've since done that. And we talked about it on our first episode. I wanted to have you back on to go over this experience. I'm super excited for this for a number of reasons, but we've actually had coffee since then, and we refrained from talking about this so we could have it for the first time on the podcast.
We did, yeah. We kept things pretty minimal, covered a lot of other topics instead, which I feel like we never struggled to find something to talk about. So,
yeah, we just recorded our first episode in person. A friend of mine and I just kind of sat down. I had a couple topic lists. We chopped it up, and just listening to the clips that came and put together, it is such a different dynamic in episode than we would typically do with the show. And I really enjoyed it. But when he was showing it to me in my head, I was like, man, this would be a great format for me and Jason, because we could literally just sit down and talk, and it would come together pretty well.
oh, dude, absolutely, yeah. I think that'd be super fun. Episode 3, 3P. We'll run it back again.
Dude, what's funny is when I do this 2 or like reoccurring episodes, you know how I'm a big fight fan, and you know how in fights, say, for example, Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski are fighting for the second time in 2 weekends. So the fight is Makhachev versus Volkanovski 2. So I've titled, like, this will be Jason Anderson 2. Ethan Schindler was Ethan Schindler 2. And I'm just going to continue to do that. But it's hilarious to me because that's like, I nerd out about that. I see the 2 and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever thought of in my life.
Yeah, that's sick. Ethan's episodes are incredible as well. Big shout out to him, by the way, because I feel like listening to both of those podcasts, I took away a lot. Like, dude's full of good knowledge.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Ethan, and if he listens to this, yeah, shout out Ethan. But he's a great guy. You guys would get along just fine.
I would like to think so. I try to get along with most people.
Yeah, he does like rim to rim to rim Grand Canyon. I think he does it once a year. And he told me, he was like, if you ever want to do that, just like let him know, and we could do it. So I'm sure that's probably something you'd want to do as well. Maybe
Kat and I have actually talked about doing rim to rim to rim multiple times. That's just like kind of a dream, like long day for us. Like we've talked about doing.
Check it off the list.
Yeah, it just seems really cool, really epic. I like that they have the lemonade stand at the bottom. Have you seen that? So like at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I can't remember what it's called. There's this little like tiny outpost, and it's got like fresh squeezed lemonade, and apparently it's some of the best lemonade you'll like ever have. Maybe that's because you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's hot as heck, but
that's awesome.
Isn't that cool?
Is it like you can get to it? Can you drive to it?
No, no. And that's probably also why it's good, because you had to like get down there on your own willpower in the hot temperatures. So
how does this business model work is what I'm wondering. Some dude just hikes it in and serves lemonade in the mountains?
burros, man. They take it down there with donkeys.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, dude, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Staying busy. Work is good. Life is good. Training's good. And collectively, it's been a season of pretty much nothing but that. So, this is the time of the year where like fall sets in and I feel like training's tapering off because I'm going into an off season, and I'm like excited to take all the energy that I've put out into basically nothing but training and like the elimination of my social life and like pour it back into that bucket. I actually made an Instagram post about this the other day of like reinvesting into the parts of my life that have been in a drought over the summer because of how much time training takes away from like friends and family. So when the cold weather comes and things start to slow down, so does training, and it gets me really stoked because not only is it my favorite time of the year, but it's inherently my time to reconnect with people, reconnect with my faith, reconnect in all the parts of my life that have been missing out. So yeah, I'm feeling fired up.
Good, man. I've been giving some thought to that lately, and for a number of reasons. It's just tough because sometimes you feel like you can't, and this is me, and I know you're like this because we want to do a million things, and there's not enough lives that I could live to do everything that I would like to do. But sometimes it's really tough to sort of prioritize what you want to be working towards, because if you try to do it all, you're not really going to do anything. And I know we've sort of had conversations in this vein before, but man, it's just sometimes tough to prioritize those things. And I think you're onto something. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that sort of periodizing your life in that way to where you just kind of committed to like, right now, I'm going to let the fitness sort of take a back seat and I want to work on whatever, or you know what, now's time I really invested in myself and shut everybody out and train hard for the next 12 weeks or anything like that. I think it's good to do that every once in a while.
Yeah, dude. And 100%, like where you invest your time, you invest your energy. And like, if you're constantly investing all of your time into your work or your craft, and then that can suck away from the other parts of your life. But I find all of those things to be super important and just like the collective of your overall happiness. So yeah, just finding a balance. It's like anything: work-life balance, training life balance, play life balance,
Yeah.
it all equals out.
I'm curious to ask you this I want to leave plenty of time for your story, but before we do that, I've been seeing a lot of that online lately. This dialogue of, how it is, like the productivity mindset, self-improvement space that you and I consume a lot of content and put a lot of content out in. It sort of seems cyclical where everybody's talking about the same thing at the same time. Something I've been seeing a lot lately is the idea that to be a high achiever, you can't have balance. You need to be obsessed for a certain time. And I don't really know what my thoughts are on that. Given what I've been doing in my life, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, I guess maybe balance is very subjective and it would require a pretty precise definition. But what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that idea?
I think the people that would claim that, I think there's a line for sure. I think balance is achievable for people like us because you and I know we've discussed this before in the past, and like you've even brought it up on other podcasts, but you desire to be good at like a few things. And like you want to be good across the board. You want to be well rounded. If you want to be an expert in one area, if you want to be the top highest level athlete in that one field, if you want to be the very best at jiu-jitsu, or if you want to be the very most if you want to be the fastest runner, or you want to be the best cyclist, or you want to be the best salesperson you can be, and you don't really have goals outside of that, then I could see the obsessiveness in one area of your life. But I think if you're someone like us, where we strive to kind of have a couple different hobbies and be okay at each of them, rather than the number one at each of them, then there is such thing as balance. Because if there wasn't, like, as much as I love cycling and want to be an ultra cyclist, I also want to be a good friend. I also want to be successful in my workspace. I also want to be successful in my walk with God. Like, and that all requires me to have a balance of each of those things. I have to invest time in each area. So if I solely invested in cycling and laid all of my identity in one thing, then I would probably be obsessive. But that's not the case for people like myself. And I hope I'm not speaking too much for you, but I feel like you're in that same boat.
100%. But I guess even my thoughts on it too are, for example, with this podcast, it's like I can only do so much to promote the show right now, like for a number of reasons. All of the obligations that you just listed with like training and family and life, but also the way that the podcast is going to grow is not through me spending 6 to 8 hours a day behind a computer, just like sending the link out to people. I mean, yeah, that would probably help with my engagement or whatever. But like, if I just record an episode every week, and I follow the plan that I've created for my promotion of uploading certain clips and sharing certain number of times to my story per week. And something that I recently started doing was finding subreddits that the topic of the podcast seems applicable to and sharing the podcast on those subreddits. And that's been going great. Like it's really only 2 to 3 hours of effort per day, which I understand is a lot. And, if somebody's listening who's in their 30s or 40s and they have kids and they want to start this side hustle and they just don't know how they're going to find the time, it doesn't even have to be 2 to 3 hours a day. It can be 30, 45 minutes a day. And you can see pretty substantial growth in yourself and the thing that you're trying to improve just from those small investments. And over time, like, yeah, it can grow to be more, but I guess I'm thinking like, I'm not self-obsessed with this podcast, but I think we're doing a great job and we're putting out a great show and we're getting it better every single episode and we're finding little ways to tweak it. And that is what's going to create a good product in 5 or 10 years, right? As opposed to investing everything I have every single day and trying to turn it into something in the shortest time frame I can.
Well, and I think that's kind of the splitting difference is a lot of people will take the obsessive approach over the cumulative approach because the obsessive approach, they want to see the results faster as to where you're taking an approach where you are putting in time, but it's like a reasonable amount of time. It's not the only thing that you're doing, but you're relying on the cumulative effect of that time to eventually put you in a position that you would be in if you obsessed over it. So it's like that is in itself a balance because you're taking the time and just splitting it up rather than taking all of the time and putting it into one area. So yeah, I think you're doing it the right way.
Yeah. Alex Hormozy talks about this with creating content, and I won't follow this rabbit hole for too much longer, but when he started growing his online platform, he was like, you can either invest time or you can invest money. Those are the two options you have. And for people like me and Cayman who are just starting out and haven't built super successful businesses, we don't have money as an option. So the only thing that we can do is make the investment and allow time to grow the audience that we desire to have. Yeah. Where that would change for an individual is, say this show does explode and we are able to make a substantial living off of it. Now, all of a sudden we have more resources to invest in a new project that would accelerate the growth of that. So just a point that what you said brought me to mind. We'll move on. I'm really curious about your story and your journey with Badlands and sort of the things that you went through. And I'm going to kind of leave the floor to you to start me wherever you feel is necessary.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll start from the very beginning here, just to give everybody a little backstory on how we even got to this point. But to kind of kick back to our first episode, I got started cycling July of 2021. Fast forward to 2022, I had done like a couple 100-mile things. I was like starting to dabble into this like idea of gravel cycling and like the roads that it opens. And And I saw these videos online about an event called Badlands, and it's an ultra cycling gravel event in Spain. And it's in like the Andalusia area, which is southeastern Spain, specifically starting out at Granada. But I started to watch these YouTube videos, and it was like breathtaking, just mind blowing. The terrain that you cross, the distance that you cover, the demand physically that it has, and the mental feat that it is just to complete this ride. So essentially, it's a 500-mile unsupported gravel cycling event. And it leaves, like I said, out of Granada and goes into the Spanish deserts, the Tabernas Desert and the Garraf Desert, and kind of circumnavigates down towards the coast of Almeria before circling back up. And you cross crazy amounts of mountains. It's essentially a double Everest, so about 60,000 feet over the course of 500 miles, so a ton of climbing. And it's hot. It's brutal. It's known to be like an average of like 95 to 100 degrees there. So I just started watching these videos, and for some reason that was the event that like spoke to me the most. It just like called to me. It was one of those things that was like beckoning, and I felt like I had to go do this at some point in my life. Did I think it would be the following year? Absolutely not. But to get into this event, you put in an application essentially where you write a summary about yourself, your cycling experience, why you want to do Badlands, and you submit this application, and it's through a lottery process in which they read all the applications. And I think for the 2023 event, they got like somewhere between like 1,600 and 1,800 applications, something crazy. So I was like, okay, like I'm for sure not going to get in, but I'm going to submit this application anyways. So I submitted the application in like, it was somewhere near this time last year, like September. And I kind of forgot about it. But I was still like obsessing over ultra cycling and wanting to start this sport and like really figure out where my limits were and test myself. And then fast forward, it was like November 11th of 2022. I like wake up and I'm like, I have this thing where each morning I go through my inbox and my email and like clear out, because I hate like looking at somebody's phone and they have like 1,000 unanswered emails. I don't know why. It's like a pet peeve for me. So every morning,
just unsubscribe.
Just get rid of it. So like every morning I'll clear out my email. And I was like going through my email, and I had an email from Badlands, and like all I could see was the title. It said, "Hey Badlander." And so like I knew before I even opened the email, I was like heart started beating so fast. I was like, holy smokes, like, is this what I think it is? And so I opened the email, and sure enough, it's like, you've been accepted to ride in the 2023 edition of Badlands. Like, so then you go through the process of like finishing the application and like paying for the event. And then it's like, oh, like at this point I had no formal training on the bike. I was like, yeah, I should probably get a coach. And so got a coach, started training, and like, yeah, we'll just like buzz through all that. Fast forward to this year, and it's like basically go time to where I'm like buying flights to Spain and like booking accommodation and like meeting up with a few friends that ride for a team that I'm kind of associated with, a shoe brand called Quack out of the UK. And so, yeah, I flew to Granada, and it's been like a 10, 11 months in the making at this point. Like, and I had never been to Spain before. So like I'd watched all these videos and like really had an idea of what the event would require, but I wasn't super familiar with the area that it started in, because none of these YouTube videos are really like, hey, by the way, here's what you can do before or after the event. It's like, here's the event. Yeah. So I like flew to Granada and had like 5 days before. And man, like what a treat that was, because this city is like very old, very like traditional, and like, in my opinion, like it's somewhat touristy, but like it's pretty low key on the map as far as tourism goes, in my opinion. And so like for it to be so tourist friendly and such a cool city, like that really got me stoked. But yeah, it was just like this crazy timeline of effects and this just like big build up that led to me finally getting to Spain and starting this race.
I think it's pretty cool. Like our first episode, we talked about your snowboarding career. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool, probably how much that time in your life prepared you for this in a way of like, you know, I'm not very well traveled. I've been to an all inclusive resort in Jamaica, and that's like the only time I flew internationally. And so, you know, for me to take on a challenge like that, where I'm traveling to another country by myself to do this thing, something that I think I would be willing to do, but that would be a huge component of it for me, of like worrying about how all that's going to go down. And I know you said you'd never been there before, but it's cool that you've had such an extensive international traveling experience in your past, to where you would be all right and you knew you would figure it out. And it was more of an exciting unknown than it was like a scary unknown.
For sure. And like the feelings definitely came back of like what it was like when I used to travel places to snowboard. Like it was that same feeling of like, wow, I'm like getting to go somewhere I've never been to do what I love. And yeah, I was there for the first whole day by myself, and like it was fine. Like I'm so used to that. I actually like really enjoy it. The first day I spent just walking laps around Granada, and I found like all the cool coffee shops. Like that was my first task. I was like, I'm going to find all the good coffee spots. And then I started hunting like little food spots, and like, yeah, I don't know, the foodie in me. And I know that term
Dude, your
is so
Instagram
cliche,
story
but
during this time was phenomenal. Keeping up
thank you.
with your adventures.
I love to let people know where the goods are, unless they're super cool, and then I might keep them secret and just like post a picture, but not really disclose the location. But no, it's sick. So like the first day, I just explored, and like, yeah, man, it was cool. It was super fun to just like be on your own and like have to figure it out. I think that's always an enjoyable part of the journey for me. And maybe that's why I like the unsupported cycling thing so much, because it is, at the end of the day, it's just you, and it's like you got to figure it out and find a place to eat and find a place to sleep and find a place to use the bathroom. I don't know. So that was super cool. And then yeah, everybody showed up the next day, and I was fortunate enough to share some of the places I've been with them. And yeah, I guess I won't drown you with too many bits of information about Granada, but had the 5 days there leading up to the race. And like I said, classic Spain, it's hot, right? But of course not. Of course, Jason finds an event and goes to it. And the day that we're supposed to start, this happens like once every few months in Spain, it's going to be cold and raining. And it was like, okay, like what? So part of this ride goes through what's called the Ramblas, which are essentially river basins that are created to direct the water away from these towns so that they don't wash away. Because like you're in the desert, and like all the water when it rains comes down from the high mountains and will just like flash flood like in an instant, like landslides and mudslides and like you name it. So they're like, well, that's like a main part of the route, but like you can't ride through it if it's full of water. Like people would literally die. So they have this big debate, and we're getting emails every day leading up to the race like, hey, we might have to change some of the course. Hey, the day might be delayed. Hey, we don't know what's going on. And like, thank goodness for Badlands, because the people that run and organize that event are absolute legends, and like did a fantastic job of keeping us updated. And like all the deliverables that they sent out in the emails and the like social media consumables were all just like super on par. And so essentially it gets to Saturday, we start on Sunday. So the day before the race, we have the like collective where they bring all the riders into the conference room at the Palacio de Congress, which is like where everybody meets up. And we're going over it, and they have like, they kind of crack a joke, and they're like, yeah, this is known as Badlands, but since it's raining this year, we're calling it Worse Lands. And so they're just like kind of poking fun at it, but they're like, yeah, we're going to have to change the route to route you around these Ramblas so that people don't get swept away by flash floods, etc. So there's like this crazy unease in the room, like a tension, like everyone is coming here expecting hot. Like I was prepared for hot, like hot I'm fine with. But as you recall, maybe in our last podcast, rain and cold weather, I don't do so well with. So I'm extra nervous because at Rockstar, becoming hypothermic in the middle of an event was not sweet. So it's supposed to be like 60, like high 50s on start day and raining. And I'm just like, oh man, like what is going on? So whatever.
We have opposite experiences with ultra races. Every one I've ever done, it's been like 70, a little bit cloudy, so the sun's not too bad, perfect weather, nice leisurely run through the woods. And yours like freezing rain, hypothermic, dark, cold, nightmare.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. So that was interesting. And yeah, we got the information that they would change the route. And so that at least provided a little bit of ease, knowing like they're not going to put us in a spot of danger. But in my head, I'm still like, okay, well, like we're going to be climbing up mountains and like it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet. And so I went out and bought an extra rain jacket and like packed all the bags on my bike way heavier than I had initially planned to, because I was like, well, I'm going to at least this time have everything I could think of that I would need. So packed it all up. The bike's like way heavier than I wanted it to be, but hey, I'd rather be heavy and alive than light and dead. So got all that done. Went out that night with the boys and carb loaded hard, had like a ton of fries and like tapas and then an entire pizza. And you know, the thing you do before ultras, just eat. And then it was race day. And so we get out there and sure enough, like there's a bunch of clouds, but it hadn't started raining yet. So that was nice. And we're like all staged, getting ready to ride out. And it's a mass start out of Granada, which means they like control the pace with a police car in the front and like guide us out of the city safely for the first few miles. And so we're like riding out, but man, like all morning I was like so anxious to the point of like my stomach was just turning, dude. I was just like, oh, like I'm so nervous. Like I hope it doesn't rain too hard. Like we just got to get going, And then finally we're riding out, and the first 20 miles of this ride is like uphill, or 20 kilometers. So you like leave the city and do this massive climb right out of the gate. And so we climb for like an hour and start the first descent. And I'm like still stoked at this point, actually, because it hasn't started raining and it's kind of almost looking like it's blowing out, but I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket. So I'm like, maybe it'll still rain, but start this descent, man. And I'm like in a turn, and dude, mind you, I'm like an hour into this like 3-day race, and I like take a turn hard and my front tire finds a huge rock and just double punctures. So I get like a puncture on the sidewall of the tire and on the top. And I'm like, you're kidding. And so I like stop, get out, get these little, they're called Dyna plugs. They're basically like these little, kind of like the bacon strips you would plug a car tire with. I like plug both parts of the tire, hit it with the CO2 can, pump it back up. And I'm like, man, like I hope this holds. Like, of course, we're just getting started. Like I flatted like maybe once in the whole year. And then I flat in the first hour of like the race I've been dreaming about. And so fix that, start riding again. And like this whole time I've just been praying like, Lord, please hold the weather, like change the weather, like keep us safe. And sure enough, man, I ride for like the first 6 hours and like it drizzles a little and then it just starts to blow out. And then the rest of the time it's just like kind of hazy, foggy, and like some sun peeks through even. And so like at this point I'm like, my tire's holding, I didn't flat, still riding, it's not raining, life is good. And yeah, so day one kept chugging along, and met this dude who, funny enough, this is like one of the YouTube videos I referenced like 100 times leading up to this race, because he's done it like 2 or 3 other times. Chris Hall, he's a big ultra cyclist and YouTuber. And I'm like riding along and I hear this voice coming up behind me, and I'm like, I know that voice, like, because I know the YouTube videos. And sure enough, it's Chris. And I like meet Chris, and we start riding together for a little bit. There's like some other dudes around us and everybody's chatting, and then everybody kind of peels off, and like it's unsupported, so you like can't draft anybody, but you can ride next to them and like chit chat, and like as long as you're not helping each other, then it's fine. And so we just start talking, man. And the next thing I know, like, we just hit it off. Like, kind of like how you and I, when we first met, we just started talking, and like one thing led to the next, and we're like, oh, this dude's rad. And they're like, this dude's rad. And so we spent the whole first day riding together. And like, that eased my mind even more because Chris, like I said, he's completed this race like a couple other times. But yeah, dude, like having that amount of time with somebody on the bike, it's like you get to know a lot about them. And so that passed the time really quick. And in the meantime, we're like passing all these crazy spots in the desert. And I'm just like mind blown, just like stoked. And as we're riding, like, I'm kind of thinking about this because the days leading up to the race, I'm like, okay, what is my real desire for this race? It's like, I spent so long getting here, and like, sure, I want to race it, but I also want to enjoy it. And I'm like, what is my true purpose here? And I think meeting Chris and like hearing his story and like spending time with him really solidified for me that I was there not to really hammer myself into the ground, but to enjoy the experience, absorb what I could, and impact in whatever way was like helpful for other people. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? Like, this is a lot bigger than me. This race is a lot more meaningful than just a time goal or a time stamp. And so I think that really just like changed my mindset. And once I realized it wasn't going to rain, like later into day one, I was really just at ease at where I was going to be for the next like 3 days, because at the end of the day, no matter what pace you're going, whether it's really hard or really slow, it's still a really hard ride. So that was refreshing. I think just finding my rhythm and my, like we talked about earlier, balance there was super important to me, getting to the finish line, but also getting to the finish line in a way that I was able to feel fulfillment, because you'll get fulfillment out of finishing a race, I think, regardless, but it's to what level and what extent. So yeah, that was huge.
What did that look like for you? What was the shift of perspective into you're there for other reasons? What did those other reasons look like?
The other reasons were really just the people around me that were also riding the event. Cause like, man, if you're out there for so long, like there's inevitably going to be points where you hit a wall. And like, if you're out there and you hit a wall, like any little thing can be a pick me up. So like if I would ride past somebody and see that they were really struggling, just words of affirmation and encouragement, like, hey man, like you're killing it. Like, the next town's only this far away. Like, and just things like that. Like, hope you're having a good day. Like, how sick is this ride? Like, just anything to encourage other people became something that I wanted to do while I was there. As well as experiencing the little towns that we were going through and seeing the communities. There were like families in these tiny Spanish villages that like at initial glance, you would think they like wouldn't even have Wi-Fi, but they're like dot watchers. So they're like watching on their phones, like these racers on the like dot trackers, and they'll like stand outside like families with kids and like cheer you on. And like, just like seeing that and like experiencing that and like trying to return the favor of being like buen dia, like, and just like sharing the stoke with them. That was a part of it, because these towns really do invest a lot. They'll keep their bars open for 24 hours just so riders have food when we get there. So yeah, I think there were a lot of different little objectives during the race, but a lot of it was like post race too, like being able to share this experience and share what I learned along the way was just something that became a bigger part of a bigger goal than I had initially set for myself, of just, hey, let's do this and let's do it in 72 hours or less.
Yeah. You have a gift for that too. In terms of being that presence. You were that for me during my 100-miler last year. You know, you paced a large section. We literally ran past one of the deadliest snakes in our area.
Yeah, we
And
did.
and you were just kind of like, well, man, I don't think we realized what it was at the time, but you were like, that could have been bad. Like, we're all right. Keep going, guy. Like, it's
Yeah,
very much that sort of positive attitude, positive light presence is something that you fall into naturally, that I think is more appreciated by people than, I mean, it sounds like you realize that, but it's more impactful than you may think.
I appreciate that. And that's a lot of it. And that's something that I continue to reflect on myself, is like, be a light. Like, being a light is a big statement that I want to truly live my life by. And if I could do that at every race, then to me, that's way more important than being like a top 10 finisher. I mean, like, sure, like, you'll get some recognition for finishing in a high place, but like, this isn't about me. Like, I don't deserve the glory for this, because this isn't on my own strength. Like, this comes from my faith. This comes from the God that I believe in, and he deserves the glory, not me. So if I can do anything, it's just to inspire and be that light, and have that positive impact. So that really became the staple of Badlands for me. It was like, take it and spin it from a time goal to an experience goal, and like, share that experience with others of like, hey man, I just started riding a bike 2 years ago, but I was able to complete this because we're all way more capable than we think we are.
Yeah, I've been giving a fair bit of thought to that idea lately, maybe in different language, but just I want to be the guy that people, like, when I call, they'll answer because they know it. I'm kind, and I care a lot, and I not even can. I don't know. I feel like we live in a world where it's like, what value do you have for me?
Yeah.
Like, this is, I'm giving you my time. So this is an exchange of value. Like, you need to give me something in order for me to take part in this. And I just don't think that is how things should work. Like, we live in such an individualized society, and it's
Mm-hmm.
bothersome to me. And, and, I'm planning a wedding, for example, which is very exciting. And
Yeah.
something we
Yeah.
talk about,
Congrats, by the way.
thank you. Something we talk a lot about is like, who's this for? And one of my things with it is like, this wedding is for my friends and my family. And it is about
Mm-hmm.
me too, but I want to take part in like this communal experience with everybody that I love and everybody that loves me. And even beyond that, outside of my circle, if there's people that I meet and I can be kind to and do something for them at no benefit to me, I want to be able to do those things. And so it kind of sounds like in the same vein, your goal as you were out there sort of shifted to this of like, I have an opportunity to do something for other people. Like, funnily enough, when I did my first ultra marathon, it was a 50 miler. The guy that I pretty much ran with, it kind of sounds like you had this sort of experience. His name was Jason. He was from Charlottesville. Um, and I remember like so much about his life and the running group that he had, but I'd never met him before this day. I just sort of noticed I was running with him, and we started talking, and we ended up doing a big chunk of the race together and got to know each other pretty well. I haven't seen the guy since, but that's like imprinted in my memory as one of the things I took away from that experience, is this time that I spent with this guy that I'll probably never see again in my life. But
Yeah.
it's cool you had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, you nailed it spot on. It's not like, yeah, people in our society definitely look at things as like a give and take. Like, if I give you this, what am I getting? But that's not it. Like, I don't know. At least not for me. I want to give, and like, I really don't have an expectation of getting anything in return, because what I get in return isn't what makes me feel good. It's that output into the world, into the society, and seeing the effect that your radiance can have. That's what makes me feel good. Like, yeah, I don't know. I could go on about that for ages.
Take me through the back half of the race. We kind of talked about the first day and your mission shifted. What did the last part look like?
Yeah, so mission had shifted, and like I decided to spend a lot of time with Chris, and we decided to just kind of like ride together. And we got to Gore that night, which is the first town that we stopped in. And Gore is, shoot, what did I do? Like 160 miles the first day. It's like 255 kilometers into the race or something. And it was sick. They had a bar. Like I said, the bars in some villages were staying open late, and this one in particular was open for 24 hours. And so we like got there and like had a good meal, and they even had the bull ring blocked off for people to sleep in. So like this town has its own like bull ring, like true Spanish culture, and they were like, oh yeah, like you can go sleep in the bull ring. And so like it was like a neutral aid area where you could like sleep on the dirt in the bull ring. I didn't bring any sleeping gear. I chose cold weather gear instead, other than emergency blanket. So I whipped out my emergency blanket and didn't really want to sleep on dirt. So I slept outside of the bull ring on the concrete with my little emergency blanket over me and my puffy jacket on. And I just like put the hood up, and that's how I slept for about 90 minutes. I probably slept an hour and a half and woke up and went back to the bar and got breakfast. And then it was time for day two. And so we're about to leave out of this bar on day two, and I had my bike set up outside of the bar, and there was this older dude that came out of the bar and went to grab his bike, and in the process of grabbing his, he knocked mine over. In doing so, he knocked it down onto the drive side, which is where all of the shifting occurs. And so what this did was bend the what's called derailleur hanger on the rear, which threw my shifting out of whack. So I tried to like bend it quickly, and then like rode back over to like meet Chris and them to like continue on our day. And the chain dropped to the inside and got stuck in the wheel. So I had to pull it out, and I'm like, well, my derailleur hanger is really bent at this point. So here we are, 2 days, 2 mechanicals. So if you're a smart rider, you bring an extra derailleur hanger, and I did. So I went to pop the new derailleur hanger on. If you're a smart rider, you bring the correct derailleur hanger, which I didn't. I had the wrong derailleur hanger and thought I had the right one. So went to put that on, didn't fit. I was like, goodness gracious, like, all right. So went and tried to bend it again and like messed with it for probably another hour and a half, and finally got it to a point where it was rideable. The problem was that I didn't have my biggest ring in the back, which meant it was my best climbing gear unusable. And why that sucked was because out of this town of Gore, we had about a 4-hour climb up to Calar Alto, which is the highest point that we would hit on this ride. And so that was brutal. Rough way to start day two. Very tired. Lots of climbing and not the most optimal gearing. So whatever. I bought a chocolate donut and told myself I'd eat it at the top once I got there as a celebratory gift. So we started riding, and sure enough, like 4.5 hours up this gravel climb to these really cool, like, they're observatories. So they're like space observatories on top of this mountain. And at this point, it was still like eerily foggy, which was super odd. And Chris kept commenting. He was like, man, I've never seen it like this in all the editions I've done. He's like, this is so weird, like having to wear a jacket. And like, I think I started that day in like arm and leg warmers. Like it was pretty cold. And he was like, this is so crazy. And then you get up there and you see these space observatories, and it literally feels like you're on Mars, because it was like full whiteout. And you're way up on this mountain, and all you see are these like big dome shaped objects. And you're like, whoa, this is crazy. But got up there and then descended down. And it was a really high speed descent for like 20 miles. So I put my puffy jacket back on, because that's like when you get real cold. And we're like cruising at this point, and I'm just having a blast, man. Like at this point, I'm riding at a very manageable pace, like not killing myself, not doing more than I need to, but really like seeing everything, absorbing it, hearing what Chris has to say. And he's just a fantastic human. Like a lot of his objectives of cycling are through like outreach projects and like charity projects, and like he really works a lot directly with like men in the UK, because there's a super high suicide rate in men in the UK, and he works through a lot of charities and nonprofits on that stuff, and like so he was telling me about all that, and so yeah, man, it just expanded upon this there is more perspective. Like there's more to this cycling thing. There's more to this ultra scene. There's more to this racing. And we kept riding. And then day 2 started to get hot finally about halfway through the day. Like we got into the Tabernest Desert and climbed out of the Tabernest Desert. And at that point, it's like finally starting to get hot. And this is like the second big climb of the day. And yeah, I think we just were really soaking it in. I was enjoying the views, but then Chris and I kept talking and chatting, and he had the time goal of doing it in like 4 days. And I was, because he's completed it before, he's been at the pointy end of the race. He was like there to just fully enjoy. And so I was like, yeah, well, like at this point, I think I still want to stay within my 3-day goal. Like I'm still at this point, like we've been chilling and I'm doing all the things I like told myself I would never do in an ultra race. Like I slept. I like stopped at multiple cafes and like sat down for like 30 minutes each time and ate food and like didn't rush and like yeah, like I'm doing the exact opposite of what I've trained myself to do for these races, but it was all in the name of like enjoyment and fulfillment and having that experience. And so at this point I'm like, all right, Chris, like I think when you stop for the end of the day, like I'll hang out for a second and then I'm going to continue to go. So we finished day 2 in this little town. Oh man, it's past Villanueva de los Torres, and then we entered like this little village that had a cool hotel, and we stopped at the hotel to eat, and it was like super fancy. There's like, I mean, you walk in and it's a hotel, but it also has a bar, but the bar is like seated dining. And we like get in there and there's like people eating in like normal clothes, and we're like grungy and like dirty and smell terrible because we've been riding for at this point like 2 days. And so we go in and we're like, yeah, we'll stop here to eat. And this is like near the end of day 2. It's starting to get dark. And I remember Chris and I sat down and there are these like long white tablecloths. And we both look at each other and like, I could tell what he's thinking and what I'm thinking. And we like both take our shoes off and like just slide them forward because we're like hoping that this tablecloth will like keep the stench of our feet inside underneath the table. And so like, that was just kind of one of those things that was funny. And ate dinner there and talked to Chris, and like we were both just like, yeah, man, like I'm so stoked on this experience of meeting you and like enjoying this time together and like making this new friendship. And then I just agreed and he agreed. I was like, I think I'm gonna press on. He was like, yeah, I'm gonna still do my like couple extra days and just take my time. And I was like, for sure. So we ate dinner. I napped again for another like 2 hours and like took a shower at this hotel and stuff and changed bibs, which was really refreshing. And then got back on the bike at like 3 a.m. And that's when I parted ways with Chris, and I pushed forward into day 3. At this point, I guess it would technically be, because I kind of at this point had separated days based on sleep, even though the time was all kind of skewed, but started at like 3:30 and started the final day push, which was the biggest day by far. I did like 350 kilometers the last day. So I started out of this little village and was like riding in the dark, and like I could tell I was like on this like sheer cliff for a lot of it, or at least it like felt like this huge drop off to my left. I couldn't really see it, but I could tell it was there. And you find a lot of that during this race. They call it like gravel cycling on the edge of Spain. And like originally you think edge, like, oh yeah, like we're on the outskirts of Spain, but it's quite literal and metaphorical in the sense that like you're on the edge of the country of Spain, but you are also like a lot of times on the edge. Like if you went over, like you're pretty done. So that was kind of a wild feeling. But at this point, I'm like pretty locked into doing my thing. Like I'm really good at riding in the dark at night by myself. Like I feel like a lot of people get freaked out in ultras when darkness comes, but for me, I just kind of like get in this rhythm and push forward, and like something about just the tunnel of light. I just kind of like, I'm like, well, this is where I am and this is where I'm going to be for a while. So let's just go. And, I listened to like a little bit of an audio book, and yeah, just kept riding. And then it was like an hour from the sun coming up. And at this point, I'm like, okay, like it'll be cool to see the sunrise. Like I'm near the coast. Like this should be sweet. And then all of a sudden I'm riding and I see like these like figures in the road. And I'm like, okay, like what? Like there's a lot of stray dogs, right, in Spain, or like a lot of farm dogs that kind of linger around. And like, so I'm like, okay, like maybe there's a couple dogs. And I like get closer and closer. And I'm like, those aren't dogs. And then I get like 10 feet away and it's wild boar. And I'm like, oh, like, I'm like, what do I like? I just keep pedaling. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, wild boar is not what I want to see right now. And luckily, it's a family of like 6 or 7 of them. They just like scurry across the road. And I just like at this point, just put the power down and like sprint as fast as I can to get out of there. And I'm like that was the only time during the solo night sections that I was like fearful. I was like, whoa, like, because those things are pretty aggressive. So like that
they're
was kind of
big too, huh?
Yeah, they're chunky. I don't know if I'd describe them as large as much as I would describe them as like dense. Like if you got hit by one, you'd feel it.
Yeah.
So
it's an
that was
offensive lineman.
Yeah, for sure. And your boy's not built for that. I'm a little too small. If I got hit by a lineman, I'd be out for the count. So that was nerve wracking. But then I got into the coast, and sure enough, like gorgeous sunrise, and I get to go up this beautiful climb, man. And I mean, it's another one of those scenarios. Like if you went over, like you're falling like hundreds, if not thousands of feet over the side of this mountain into like the coast, like the sea is below you. But it was like the most beautiful climb. Like I remember that one out of all of them, the most vivid, because I was just by myself and like the sun's coming up and like you're just winding around this mountain on the edge of the sea. And so that was cool. And finally get into this little village that had a bakery open at like 7:30 in the morning, and like smashed 2 huge croissants and kept pushing on because I knew at this point I wasn't too far off from the area where there's this infamous part of Badlands where you like have to hike a bike, like walk your bike physically across a sandy beach. And everybody like hates it. But I like got there and it was a lot shorter than I was expecting. So that was kind of a relief. I was like, at least I'm not pushing my bike for like 2 hours. It was like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So I like knew at that point, I was like, okay, I'm at the flattest point, and it's flat for like 30 miles before I start the final stretch. So you get into the city of Almeria, which is on the coast. And I knew at this point, I was like, okay, well, I need to stop there and like really reload my supplies and my nutrition and my food moving forward, because we're about to go into like a pretty tough section. It's like the last 200 kilometers is hard, and the final like 100 kilometers is like super hard because it's climby, it's chunky, it's just like you're going straight back up into the mountains. So I get into the beach town. It's like the largest city you pass through the entire event, and I stopped and I saw a bike shop, and I was like, I'm gonna go there and have my brakes changed because they were like feeling pretty soft. Like I've descended like 40,000 feet at this point, so like I've used most of my brakes, and I put new brakes on before the event, but they were pretty shot at this point. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop there. And I was like, hopefully they're down to like change them quickly. And I walk in and like chat with them, and they're like very familiar with Badlands, and they were like, yeah, like 30 minutes, is that cool? And I was like, absolutely. I was like, I'll go eat breakfast. So I like walk over to this other spot. Once again, we're in a city at this point, and people are looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm just like walking around in my smelly bike kit, like up to this nice like patisserie. And I'm like, I need a tostada, I need a smoothie, I need a croissant, like, and just order this huge breakfast. And I'm just kind of prepping myself to do this last push because I've been riding since 3 a.m. It's now like 10. So I'm already 7 hours into the day, and I know I've got, shoot, man, at this point, I still had another like 130 miles ahead of me. and I intended to do it all in one go. So I was like going to do a 200-mile day, and it was arguably the hardest day. So I really loaded up and went back to the bike shop to pick up my bike and noticed their wall of apparel, and there was like a fresh pair of socks that was really calling my name. So I bought a new pair of socks and got back on the bike and like thanked them and grabbed my stuff from the supermercado down the street, a ton of water and snacks and these little like cakes. They have these little cakes there that are like prepackaged that I really enjoyed. So I like shoved a bunch of those in my jersey and started pedaling away. And yeah, that was the start of the final day, and it got hot. And I mean like really hot. By 11 a.m. I had started this like 2-hour climb out of Elm area, which is like chunky. I mean like huge, like baby head sized boulders that you have to like pick a line across for 2 hours. So not only is it taxing on your body, but mentally you're just like drained from trying to pick a line and not flat your tire on something. And so True Spain came out the last day in like full effect, and like that was a whole nother animal, because you went from 2 days of being like kind of cold and like weird on the temperature to being like really hot and sweaty and like depleting yourself. So final push, final day, I'm starting to like get up into the mountains again. And this whole time I've got like a WhatsApp chat going with the group that I stayed with, all the Quack guys from Granada. And my friend Alberto had been like ahead of me for most of the race, and then he had slept the night that I continued pushing through. So he was like behind me at this point, and everybody's chatting, and like some of the guys are in the final section and they're like, man, this crap is like hard. Like this last 100K is absolutely brutal. And so we know this, and we keep pushing forward, and I get like up into a couple of the mountain towns where I can fill up bottles and stuff again. And I'm like kind of chatting with the guys, and Alberto's behind me, and we both know we're going to go through this like really heinous section, the final push at like 2 a.m. And they were telling me like some of this is like mountain bike terrain. And like, if you go off, like it's like potentially like life hazardous. And it was Alberto's first ultra, and we started chatting. He was like, hey man, like, you're not far ahead. Like, should we like link up and like maybe do this last section together? And I was like, I'm like, dude, this is like, yes, like 100% I'm down. Like, let's meet up. Let's link in one of the next towns, and then we'll push through this night section together. Because we were both at this point, we were both like, yeah, we're pretty tired, and like having company is not going to be a terrible thing. Like a lot of these ultra events and like races specifically, the intent is to not be with people. But once again, circling back to like the sense of community, it's like, what's the purpose? Like if I'm doing it on my own and not benefiting of anyone other than me, like what's the ultimate stimulus? So I was like, dude, absolutely. Like I'm so down to share that experience with somebody. So like I got to the final town, had dinner. I was like, yeah, I'll wait for you here. He was like 20 kilometers back, but it's all uphill. So it was like a solid like 2-hour wait. And then he got there and he was like beat and like wanted to eat some food. So I hung out with him for that. And we hung out for probably another hour. So I just like, once again, just like let 3 hours go by, which is something I typically probably wouldn't do if I was trying to properly race something. But it was more to me at this point about like sharing that final push with somebody that I had become really close with over the last week. And so we left out of that final village and started the last 100Ks, man. And at this point, you've been going for like 3 days. And so like even the things that aren't too hard are hard, and the things that are really hard seem impossible. So we start riding, and this was like, I'd started at 3 a.m. and like we were creeping up on the 24 hours of riding, or time awake at least, mark. And I started to get pretty sleepy. So it got to the point where we were doing a climb, and I was like kind of drooping on the bike, and then I'd come back to. And then one time I like drooped and like started to sleep on the bike and like turned a little, and luckily I went right instead of left, because left's like off the mountain and right is into the embankment of the mountain that continues going up above me. And I like ran into it and just like hit a stop and was like, whoa. And Alberto like looks back and he's like, dude, he's like, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty cooked. Like, I think I should nap. So we took a 20-minute nap on a bench in the next town we got to, and then pushed again. And same thing, we went like a couple hours and I started to get sleepy again and took another 20-minute nap and basically started breaking these sections down in like pushes of like a couple hours each. And yeah, man, just spent that time with Alberto, like really seeing this thing through. And like as we continued to go, like I'm sure you're familiar with this from doing 100-milers and from pacing and crewing people, but like watching someone else enter the pain cave is like a pretty wild feeling. And it's even crazy if you're in and out of it yourself. So at this point I was like, man, this is still the idea is like get to the finish line, but the idea is also still to like be a positive impact. So like Alberto was getting to a point where he was like really hurting, and all I could think of was like, I just got to encourage him and like keep him going. But it was like, it's crazy trying to put forth that like positivity when you're also hurting was like something I hadn't really experienced before. So I was like finding myself like drawing deep from the well, and like, yeah, it was cool. It was something that I'll definitely remember. And then, yeah, just kept pushing, kept going, and finally got there. And it was a wild last day because all of it started to blur. And I mean, there's a million different factors and things that I could throw in, but we'd be on here talking about it for ages. But finally crossed that finish line, man. And it was a crazy feeling. I like fully broke down at the finish line, like just in tears of enjoyment and happiness for like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe I've watched this event unfold on YouTube and watch people cross the finish line. And now I'm that person. I'm the guy crossing the finish line. And it was just one of those moments where like all of the emotions, all of the time spent getting to that point, not just during the event, but everything that led up to it compounded all at once. And I just like lost it in happy tears, man. I was just stoked.
Yeah, that's a really, beautiful way to sort of wrap up that experience. And I think something you said there earlier on was that you go into some of these things thinking it's like an experience for you. And I've never done an ultra marathon like that. My first one, I had that guy, Jason, that I spoke with the entire time. And the second one, a large chunk of it was spent with you and the crew, and there's no possible way that I could have done that. And so like, whether you're there as a solo or you've got a team of people around you, it's always an experience about everybody else that's sort of along the ride with you.
Yeah, there's a bigger picture, man. And like, I love the category of like solo unsupported in cycling is a lot more feasible than solo unsupported running, I think, just because of the capacity of things that you can carry on a bike versus just carrying on your body. So there's this like big draw to the unsupported category of cycling that I really enjoy and like, but it all circles back to that thing we've been talking about this whole time, is like, if you're doing it alone, like what do you get out of that more than just like hey, I was capable, I was able, and I did this by myself. It's like at the end of the day, you still didn't do it by yourself, because that power isn't your own. And like, there's still people that supported you in getting you to that start line. There's still all these extra factors, and it's like, hey, like, I do want to do these events in a sense that like I did it on my own will and my own willpower, but there's always external things to it. So like for me during Badlands, the idea of like worrying about it being completely solo and like shutting myself off from everybody didn't make sense. Like, out of all the ultras I've done, the sense of community I witnessed and felt during Badlands was far beyond everything else. Like, even though it is a solo unsupported gravel event, you see people, like you see the media cars, you see other riders at bars, you pass people on the road. Like, everybody's at a different pace. So you're always interacting, you're always seeing, and like you're not helping each other. So it's still self-supported, but there is a sense of interaction. And through those interactions, you have an opportunity to make someone's day better, to lighten the load, to let them know that, hey, it's okay. And like, we're all in this together. We're all here to achieve the same goal. But like, if I can impact somebody, even just in those quick encounters, like, isn't that so similar to life? Like, where you pass somebody on the street and just saying like, hey, like, good morning, like that can have such an impact on somebody. And I kind of see these races in the same way, like whether that interaction is short as like a passing, or if it's as long as riding next to somebody for 12 hours, it's like there is an opportunity for you to have an impact. And that's just, yeah, I think I found a new realm of why I enjoy these things.
Does this change what you want to accomplish in the space at all?
Definitely. I would say that this completely changes what I think I would like to do with ultra cycling, as far as like, now this is no longer a results based goal for me. It is all simply a goal of how I can impact, how I can promote positivity and happiness, and teach people that they can do whatever they want to do with the right training, with the right time, with the right patience. That's all very much an aspect of where I think I want to go. And like, the more I think about it and the more I think back on the YouTube videos that inspired me to go to Badlands in the first place, like it makes me really want to, like, I know the YouTube space at this point is pretty like saturated, but I still feel like if there's an opportunity for you to put out in the world what you learned, then why not? Like, why keep it to yourself? Like, share that. So I had a YouTube for a while. I really think I want to bring it back and share these trips, share these adventures, share the things I'm learning along the way. Not that I'm any kind of expert, but man, I just love it. And I want other people to love it too.
Yeah. And it's, if anything, it's for you. And hopefully having this conversation is the same thing, where it's like sort of going to reinforce this memory a bit more for you for the rest of your life, you know, going through the experiences. When I wrote about my 100-miler, that was a game changer for me. Like, I remember so many things about that experience because I spent the week afterwards writing down everything that happened.
Yeah. And I feel like this is like one of those, Badlands is one of those things for me where like I could probably have a whole nother podcast with you and like tell you so many things that I didn't even think to tell you in this one, you know, like there's so many memories from it. It's crazy. But yeah, I think it definitely lent to my ultimate goal. But I will say, for me, there is still the other aspect of racing in which I still want to go do well. Like for me, finishing Badlands, I had those emotions and I was just stoked. And I would not for 1 second consider changing the way I did the first experience of Badlands. But I will say that probably 15 minutes after I finished, I was sitting there eating a meal and I was like, yeah, you finished. Yeah, you got the stimulus you were looking for, but you didn't challenge yourself. And so like there is still the me versus me aspect in which I do want to return to Badlands in 2025. And now that I've gotten the experience of fully absorbing and putting myself into that setting, I would love to go back and actually give it a go with like full effort, like blow myself up, see what I can really do, achieve a better time goal, and like slot myself in somewhere. But I think that that's all going to come with balance. Like having, once again, the events and using them to inspire and impact, but also having the events I want to return to at a later date and be like, okay, now I'm going to really go for this as a racer. I think there's going to be a little bit of both for me.
Yeah, well, that's just, you know, being an athlete, right? Like I show up to the gym some days and I'm like, all I care about is fitness and muscle and strength, and I'm going to kill myself to get a good workout. And other times I show up and I'm like, man, I'm lazy. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do this. And, you know, it's just about getting in. I think sometimes it's just, each race, each thing you do, each session is going to be a different thing, and sort of honor yourself in that way by doing whatever you feel is right. As you started going, you felt like it would be better suited to take a slower, quote unquote slower, but just a different approach. And who knows, you might show up to your next race and think, I'm going to absolutely thrash myself today. Like, let's do this thing. And I think that's okay too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think letting that stimulus come to you rather than trying to find it is important, because I think for me, I definitely will try to seek out, like, okay, what is the goal? What do I want to achieve? And like, I can get caught up in the selfish, what do I want out of this? But if you're open-ended and, like I heard somebody say the other day, a loose plan is still a plan. Like, if you go in just loose and let it come to you and figure it out as you go, that's typically the better approach, I find. And that's where I've really gotten the most learning from this year, is settling in to the uncomfortable experiences and saying, okay, well, I'm here and I can't really change where I am right now. So let me be present and allow whatever is going to come from this to come to me. And I think that speaks volumes to me as far as how I've performed and come through this year as an individual, far beyond a race result.
Mm. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. Is there anything else you want to add?
Man, until the next one, I think we covered a pretty good bit of it.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me ramble.
You got it, man. When we do Jason Anderson 3, that'll be next time.
2024 race calendar. Line it up.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you again so much. I love you.
Thank you. Love you, dude.
We'll do this anytime.
Absolutely. We'll get coffee soon.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jason as much as I did. Before we sign off, if you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. If you really enjoyed this episode and there's somebody in your life you think would enjoy it, please consider sharing it with them, perhaps even your grandma. We'll see you next time.